Hello on the Rockers. On this week's episodes, it's a very special music episode with musical impresario and the ambassador of the Great American Songbook, Michael Feinstein is here, with guest co-host, multi-Grammy and Emmy winner, Laura Dickinson, music producer, voice actor, music contractor, and the voice of many Disney projects, by the way, with me. No Grammy or Emmy nominations in sight, but your favorite host with the sassy most. Raise a glass and let the drinks begin.
Life is a banquet, and most poor suckers are starving to death.
I'd like to propose a toast.
This is On the Rocks with Alexander, where I drink with your favorite celebrities as we talk about fashion, entertainment, pop culture, reality TV, and, well, that's about it. So pop a cork, lean back, and raise a glass to On the Rocks.
Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
Listen to that applause. Buttons and bows and pantyhose. On the Rocks podcast is a place where we're too glam to give a damn. If I say something sassy tonight, just slap me. Favorite highlights of the Oscars should have been Ariana DeBose, the first openly queer woman of color, taking home Best Supporting Actress. 3 kick-ass women hosting the Oscars. And, of course, Liza Minnelli celebrating 50 years of cabaret with her touching moment with Lady Gaga. That's what we should be focusing on.
Amen.
Okay. Like us on Twitter and Instagram at On The Rocks On Air and on Facebook, On The Rocks Radio Show. Send me an email. Book me for a wedding, funeral, quinceañera, bris. I don't care. I will show up. Info at OnTheRocksRadioshow.com. You can watch and or listen to now almost 300 episodes at OnTheRocksRadioshow.com. Also on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and the Outlet.tv app, Facebook Watch, Streaming with Pride on SVTV, and on Channel 31 on the East Coast, 4 times a week. You're lucky, East Coast. The show is brought to you by FanDaddies.com, bringing you the sassiest and classiest clacking fans and hats for prides, EDM parties, sassy selfies, and even sci-fi nerds. Live long and prosper. Head to FanDaddies.com. And, of course, a word of warning, tonight's shenanigans are being fueled by the vodka tastings of NEFT vodka. Pure taste, it's damn good vodka, and I never have a hangover. Drank neat or with anything you want to mix for. Order NEFT next time you're at the bar, or buy some for your personal liquor at home. Head to neftvodka.us for more info. All right, let's get the show on the road. My guest co-host today also came on the show many, many years ago when I was first starting. Working full-time in the music industry for the last 2 decades with her first recording session at age 7, multi-Grammy and Emmy winner Laura Dickinson is perhaps best known for her extensive work on Phineas and Ferb, in addition to being a sought-after music producer, contractor, arranger, and voice actor with clients including Cartoon Network, Netflix, HBO Max, Amazon Studios, Riot Games, DreamWorks Animation, Michael Bublé, Dolly Parton, and Disney Television Animation.
Breathe, honey, breathe.
I know, girl. She serves on numerous SAG-AFTRA committees and on the board of directors for the American Society of Music Arrangers and Composers. She's currently working as lead composer on an upcoming animated television series and independent short film, in addition to multiple projects in development as a writer. And in between her many gigs and appearances, she gets married.
I did! Yay!
And just like that, she gets married, and then she's literally sending work emails that same day, because I received one. I'm like, girl, go get married. Please welcome Laura Dickinson.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's such a joy.
That was a long bio. I got to trim it up.
No, that's even the short version, because there's, so many credits and so many projects that you've done, from like American Horror Story to so many Disney to every kind of show. You're like, oh, I didn't realize that there was vocal. And then you think about it, you don't think about exactly how much music and vocal singing there are.
Thanks for noticing. But today is not about me.
Not about you, but I do want to talk briefly, real quick. We just had the Oscars, and we've had categories that were taken out for runtime. And, of course, people are saying, oh, the Oscars made a bad choice. ABC said, you have to keep it right at that, or we're not going to air it. So that's why the categories were taken away. It wasn't some, artistic decision.
But it still went over, right?
Well, because there was some shenanigans going on. Slap, slap. But you talk often about SAG-AFTRA vocalist and AFM instrumentalist forgotten about in post-production without screen credit, and that 90% of the people in the industry do not know what a music contractor is or a vocal contractor is. So for our audience that might not be familiar, what is a music contractor?
It's someone that's like the casting director for players and singers. And it involves so much from the beginning of pre-production to post-production, and a lot of times the director or the editor or whoever on the production team doesn't know we even do what we do, because we see the film behind us and we see the credits rolling. And we're like, well, we're not done yet. So it's one of the few, I think it is the only SAG-AFTRA contract that says you have to direct and you have to be the talent at the same time. It's kind of similar to a stunt coordinator in that when you need stunts in a film, you have to have a stunt coordinator to just make sure everything is above board, all the contracts, all the timing and everything. That's a little bit similar to what contractors do, but there's so much more involved, whether they're on camera, off camera. If you're they use the term sidelining if you're playing along to someone else playing a pre-record, if you're doing the pre-record and then miming along to your voice, your instrument. It's a lot of work, and I'm excited to talk about it in a positive way.
Well, it's funny because when I researched, because I'll be honest, I did not know exactly everything that you do because I see that you've done so much. And the first time you were on the show, like I said, which was years and years ago, I've just seen you blossom and do so much. And then so I started to pay attention to everything I was watching, whether it was a reality TV show, whether it was, Real Housewives, or whether it was the Academy-nominated films. Every little piece of music, every little piece of sound, every little time you hear singing, it really kind of blends together, so you don't really notice all of that.
And then if you even tune your ear in a little bit more, so to their tune, then you'll be able to tell which music is made in the box and out of the box. You're like, oh, that sounds like might be a MIDI orchestra, or no, wow, that is a real orchestra. Or like the other day on Jeopardy, the cue, the clue was what is an oboe, and I'm like, that's actually a keyboard playing a MIDI synthesized oboe.
Oh my God, it must have, like nails on a chalkboard. That must have been.
It was interesting, but I try to talk about it for music education. I sit on the board of directors at ASMAC. We've had Michael join us there and be so wonderful to that organization. But I just speak about it as much as I can because I was a kid and I saw the credits roll, and those names that I saw, I ended up working with all the time, those people. Yeah. And I said when I was 9, I'm like, I want to do that because I could hear it when I'm watching, my favorite animated film of all time. And the credits are important. The music is important in all the screens that we put in front of kids' faces. So
That's
it's
exactly
just keeping music alive, keeping live concerts alive and orchestra work. And I think one of the best things on the planet is taking a young person to see a symphony orchestra. Be like, which one do you like?
And what else is exciting for me to see is for you to be in such control, to see you, conducting an orchestra, to see you, putting these projects together. As a woman in music, we're really focusing on equality and inclusivity. And so for me, when I see, I see this strong, kick-ass woman like owning the industry
Thank you.
in your sector, it's very, very exciting. Has that been a slow kind of journey where you've had to prove yourself maybe a little bit more than you should have if you were a man?
It's all in the book. I was talking about this morning on one of our SAG-AFTRA committee meetings because giving back to the community, I didn't have any agent, any parents that knew about the industry when I was, 7, starting out behind a microphone. And, I got into all the things that we do not want children to get into. Age, race, gender, discrimination, sexual harassment like you would not believe. And that's my mission in life, is to give back and talk about it. And as a LGBTQIA plus woman, I just have to speak about things positively and help people understand in a positive way, like positive, because so many times we're just like, I can't believe you said that. Like today, what someone said, I just wanted to explode. I'm like, how are you still talking like this? But nope, we talk about it positively. I'm like, nope, you just went to a wedding.
Girl.
So yes, positive, and I'm so excited to be here with Michael because I'm just such a big fan, and it's been an inspiration of many years, and just what a perfect ask for a perfect scenario.
It was funny because we hadn't talked to each other, and it was on social media. You messaged me like, I literally was thinking about it, like, who do I get to help co-host, somebody way in the performing that understands their journey and being a young genius like yourself.
Well, I don't think 42 is young anymore, but I'm
trying. Very young.
Sorry, 3012.
All right. the man of the hour himself. So excited to have him here in studio. Michael Feinstein, in addition to his recognition as one of the leading musical entertainers and piano virtuosos of the recent decades, his work as an educator, archivist, interpreter, and ambassador of the Great American Songbook have established the popular and honored musician as a preeminent force in contemporary music. His dazzling career as a top-selling and critically acclaimed recording artist and a star performer on Broadway and the world's great concert stages has earned him 5 Grammy Award nominations, 2 Emmy nominations for his PBS TV specials, and acclaim for his NPR series. And his live concerts have spanned the globe, literally the globe, including such iconic venues as the White House, Buckingham Palace, Hollywood Bowl, Carnegie Hall, and the Sydney Opera House. He started playing piano by ear as a 5-year-old. And he moved to LA after high school, and he became Ira Gershwin's assistant for 6 years, which earned him access to numerous unpublished Gershwin songs, many of which he has since performed and recorded. And Gershwin's influence provided a solid base upon which Feinstein evolved into a captivating performer, composer, and arranger of his own original music. He also became an unparalleled interpreter of music legends such as Irving Berlin, Jerome Kern, Johnny Mercer, Duke Ellington, and Harry Warren. He's received 3 honorary doctorates, and his latest album, Gershwhin Country, is a reimagining of the songs of George and Ira Gershwin with country music's biggest stars. Executive produced by Liza Minnelli, featuring Dolly Parton, Alison Krauss, Brad Paisley, Lyle Lovett, Rosanne Cash, and many, many others. Oh, and Amy Grant, by the way. She's also in this. Please welcome Mr. Michael Feinstein.
Doctor.
Doctor! 3-time doctor.
You forgot to mention my Paul Lynde impression.
I did not know you did a Paul Lynde impression.
Well, you didn't ask me.
Stand by for the biopic.
Yeah.
Oh, can you imagine?
Yes, I can actually. That is so
It would
funny.
be wonderful.
Oh, Paul Lynde, I had no clue you could do that.
Oh, I was at a party once, playing a party years ago, and Paul Lynde was there, and he was drunk, and he came over to me and he said, "Pick up the tempo," and he poured his drink in the piano.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So that's one of my Paul Lynde stories.
My God. Were you like, well, obviously you were upset, but you were like, oh, it's Paul Lynde.
Well, I always thought Paul Lynde was the greatest, but
He ruined a piano.
he ruined a piano.
It wasn't yours, though.
No, I was at a party. I was at a party in Hollywood, and hired. That's what I did. And
Yeah.
There he was.
Did he try to hit on you too? I'm sure.
No, he was kind of reeling, kind of work. He was in his cups. No, he didn't hit on me because he had other stuff in mind. I guess I don't know.
Oh, okay. All right. Now, do you do any other impressions?
Well, I only do dead people.
Say that in the wrong crowd. It
Right.
comes across a little odd.
Well, the usual gay icons. Anyone can do Betty Davis, but I did Carol Channing, Peter Lorre.
I loved Peter Lorre because he was. But Peter Lorre is very close to Paul Lynde because it's the same kind of voice. And then you do Carol Channing. Carol's the same kind of voice as well. Or Liberace. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I really am excited to be here and play some boogie woogie for you.
It's all kind of in the same. I can't do what Laura does, which is many, but I have my own little bailiwick. I think that's the technical term.
That is amazing. And that's our show.
Yeah, and
Good night, everybody.
thank you. Actually, that's my Michael Douglas impression. So
Yes. And you're right. They all kind of have that kind of
They all
same...
kind of the same kind of,
Yeah.
yeah.
Who knew?
Very chewy.
Yeah.
Chewy, yes. I don't do Chewy, but
I do Chewy after a night in West Hollywood and then Del Taco raw nachos. Started playing by ear at age 5. Music was kind of in your family growing up. Your father had been kind of an amateur singer, and your mom was a tap dancer.
yes. My dad loved music. There were no professional musicians in our family, but they loved music, and he loved to sing, and his brothers and cousins all sang, so we would have family gatherings where there was always music, and they loved barbershop. My dad was a member of SPEBSQUA.
Yes.
You know what I
Yeah.
expect you to the Society for the Preservation and
Yes.
Encouragement of Barbershop Quartet Singing in America. And
They're serious.
they were, wonderful, tight harmonies, incredible music. And his favorite vocal group was the Mills Brothers, who were iconic from the 30s into the 70s. And so I grew up with all of that. My mom was a tap dancer, and she wanted me to dance. And, of course, because my mother was pushing me, I immediately retreated to the piano.
And just like naturally, you just wandered over and just started.
I did. I started playing by ear. My parents bought a new house when I was 5 years old. I have two older siblings. And they only had enough money to either buy furniture or buy a piano. They had $500. And my dad said, let's buy a piano. And my mother said, no one's going to play it and we won't have any furniture. And my dad said, oh, come on, maybe one of the kids will play. And it was just instinct. And they bought this spin-it piano for $500, and they brought it home. And the next day, I sat down and started playing it. And my mom said, who taught you that? I said, nobody. She said, you're lying. Somebody had to teach you how to do that. I said, I made it up. She said, no, you didn't. Somebody taught you. And she sent me to my room for lying. So that was my first connection of pain with music that has continued. Then my father came home from work, and she said, you taught him that, right? He said no, and they realized I was playing by ear. So I just kept playing by ear.
Well, and you actually went to get vocal instruction, and the teacher was like, you're not...
Piano instruction, yeah.
Yeah, piano instruction. And you weren't following the music, so your mom was like, well, that's enough of this.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. They took me to Capital University, the music school there, which was near our house, and the teacher would always play the exercise for me with the music on the piano, so I would just listen to her and I would copy it. But about 6 weeks in, she put the music up and said, play that. And I said, will you play it? She said, just play it. I said, I can't. She said, why not? You've been playing. I said, no, I've been listening to you. And she went out into the hall where my mom was waiting. She said, Mrs. Feinstein, do you know that your son is playing by ear? As if it was like, dirty scrawl on a bathroom wall or something. And my mom said, yeah, didn't you know? And she said, no. And so from that point on, I basically taught myself. I did have one teacher at one point who taught me chord substitutions, which was very valuable. But otherwise, I really learned in piano bars, learning how I had the hardest thing, and Laura will appreciate this, was learning how to play and sing at the same time.
Which is so important because you save a lot of money, number one, because you don't always
Don't
have to
hire.
book
Yeah. But I mean, it's like a left brain, right brain thing. You have to accompany yourself, and it was one of the hardest things that I had ever done. But I learned it. At first, I learned sort of rudimentary ways to accompany myself, and then I was able to expand more. But I can't think about what my hands are doing, because if I do, I always get messed up. So I just kind of feel my way, and then I can do it.
So how did you incorporate kind of that formal sight reading in joining orchestras and joining productions? You kind of had to mix that in with playing by ear, no?
Yes. Well, I've been conducting the Pasadena Pops now for about a decade, and I am still...
which you will be in June, right? You're going to be
4th.
Performing.
Yes, with Larry.
Yes.
With Larry Blank, yes. I have to do a lot of preparation because I'm not facile as a reader. I'm actually a pretty poor reader.
That is so interesting. That is very, very interesting.
I'm glad you find it that.
I just I did so much research, and I'm just like, I was like, but we all know about your achievements, your many performances,
So you'd like to hear about my failures?
collaborations. No.
Yes.
I've got lots of them.
Well, no, those are also important to talk about because we always see the successful side, and there are a number of listeners that listen. We have a lot of listeners that are in the entertainment community, and they're having their struggles, and we know the industry is kind of an interesting time right now, and so it is important to talk about certain failures and certain things that we've learned. But what I was most shocked by in learning was moved from Ohio to Los Angeles right after high school. You were playing in piano bars in Southern California, in the LA area, in your 20s. And you did that for a couple of years.
Yes, I did it till around 1986, so I did it for about 10 years.
I did not know that.
Did you have a favorite location in LA to play?
There used to be a place in LA on La Cienega called the Cabaret, and it was a great, great room. It was torn down ages ago, but everybody came into that club. It was a restaurant and a bar, and it was gay, but it was very mixed, and a lot of show business people came in. And I met Johnny Ray. Johnny Ray was the only singer to have 4 songs on the top 10, number 1, 2, 3, and 4. He knocked Elvis Presley off the charts. I met Johnny Ray and got to know him. And Cloris Leachman came in one night, and I met the character actor Richard Deacon, and I met a lot of amazing people. And And that was a great thrill because I was a kid from Ohio. And to meet these people and to interact with them. And the other person whom I met, whom I adored, was Craig Russell. Craig Russell was one of the great impersonators, female impersonators. He was dazzling, and he made a movie called Outrageous, which is one of the groundbreaking gay films of that time, filmed in Canada, where he was from. And he sold out Carnegie Hall and was one of the most gifted mimics I ever saw. And he eventually destroyed himself. He couldn't handle something inside of himself. But those were extraordinary times. Such talent.
There's a picture.
There he is. Yeah. He did the greatest. Peggy Lee. He did Bet. He was so damn funny. Oh my God, he was funny and he was brilliant.
What I love it looking at performers from that kind of era, when we're talking about female impressionists, and we see the evolution of like Drag Race, and then we see certain performers that just can't perform. It's not just about putting on a gown and putting on the makeup that sometimes they don't even do themselves. You know, being in that kind of environment took so much skill. It took to command a room, to be a funny host, to it wasn't just. I mean, it was a whole different era, and I wanted to know what you want the younger generation of nightlife kids, musicians, even gay boys to understand most about like the West Hollywood area in the 80s, because it's a whole different culture than it is now, obviously. What would you like them to learn the most about that time?
History and continuity has always been important to me because I've always had a sense of reincarnation, of feeling other experiences at the same time I feel the present world. And maybe that's a means of wanting to escape the present world, I don't know. But I've always had a feeling of history, and every place has a vibe, a vibration, an energy filled with where everybody who has come before has placed there. It's like San Francisco has always been a place that is alternative. Always. If you go back and look in the 1800s of the gold rush, there were people who were living alternate lifestyles way back then. There's something about that place that has made it what it is, that is just in the land, in the rocks, in the energy. It's just there. And so West Hollywood is that thing too. But when I would go into those bars, like I don't even know if the Blue Parrot exists anymore, probably not, long gone. But there were all these bars with bird names, and these places went back so many decades before, and I would meet people who had been part of that earlier wave, and they would tell me stories about how Judy Garland used to live in the Norma Triangle, and Estelle Winwood and Dorothy Parker, and they were all part of the West Hollywood community, and they would hang out in those places. And so there is a history that transcends time and space, that just is part of the energy that makes those places desirable. There's something about them that is safe and comfortable and is something that is part of a continuum. What do I want people to know about it? That there are a lot of people who worked very, very hard to create the freedom that we have today.
Right.
That's the bottom line.
I think that is very important for the younger generation. I'm still very active in West Hollywood, and you see these young kids coming up, and they don't realize how lucky they are to be able to hold hands with somebody that they love, or to be out and party up in the front. There was a time in West Hollywood that the entrances would be in the back, like in the alleyways, because
a friend, a famous designer, his name was Nolan Miller, and Nolan was an amazing guy. He was bisexual, and I don't think he would mind my talking about him in this way, but he was more gay than straight. But he talked about how there used to be bars that he would go to on La Cienega where men could gather, but you had to be very careful because there was always Vice Squad. There were always
Raids
people
all the
who were
time.
going to ruin your life.
Yeah.
And there were morals clauses at the television studios and the film studios. So if you did anything, you not only were arrested, and then you were sometimes beaten, and you were taken. Fees would drain everything you had financially, and then your life was ruined because your name would be printed in the newspaper, and you would lose your job. So that's what it was like. And that was in West Hollywood.
I mean, you kind of just even have to take a breath and think about that. And we're talking about the '80s. It's not a million years ago. It's
Well,
not
this is
some
actually going
foreign
back
time.
further than the '80s, but by the '80s, that was not happening. But still, there was. I knew a producer who worked at Universal, who was so terrified of being outed, even though he was a very successful producer. Another guy who was blackmailed. There was a guy who outed, but he was so scared because of being around 30 years earlier that he paid off this guy until his dying day. And I kept saying, "What are you doing?" He said, "You don't understand." And I said, "Okay, all right," because I wasn't him. So it was extraordinary.
So what must it have been like as a young kid going from Columbus to this kind of environment where there's this kind of fellowship and this sexual freedom, so to speak, but also half the community is dying of AIDS. What did your family back home say about you kind of being in this environment? And it must have been a little culture shock for you.
Well, when I told my mother that I was gay, she said, "You have to promise never to tell anybody."
Which is not easy
No.
to hear.
And I said, I can't promise that. But she was so embarrassed, and she got over it quicker, and then my dad eventually did too, and they became very embracing and loving. The only thing that got terrible is that my mom was trying to introduce me to guys, and she had terrible taste. I was like, "Mom, would you please stop?" Well, this is a very nice man. I go, yeah. No, thank you. Thank you. Hi, nice to meet you. And it's like, no. But it was a different world out here. It was amazing because there was such a sense of freedom, of being able to just go out and party and not worry about it with certain people. Because when I would go to events, I would go with a guy, or I didn't try and cover up anything because I felt comfortable enough. But I wasn't famous. I was just doing what I was doing. And then when you start to get celebrity, then everything changes. And I was in that transitional period where it was something that could hurt your career. I mean, being a guy who sang show tunes, it wasn't as dangerous, as it was for a leading man. But still, there were ramifications, and there was fear about it because everybody said, "Oh, you can't come out. You can't come out. You just can't do it." And that was the thought, the belief.
My friend Stan Zimmerman was he was a writer for season 1 of The Golden Girls, and that was during the 80s. And he was in West Hollywood, and he was told, "You cannot come out," even as a writer for The Golden Girls, which we think is one of the most progressive shows.
Right.
Or don't tell people in West Hollywood because they will be afraid to sit next to you. They'll be afraid to touch you because they still had this idea that you could die from touching somebody with AIDS, and it was that kind of horror to even be able to associate yourself, or even going to a friend's funeral because it was that fear that you could instantly be blacklisted because of this epidemic.
Yeah. I was the butt of jokes on The Tonight Show in Johnny Carson's monologue several times.
Were you really?
Yeah. They were veiled, not so veiled, but they were jokes that clearly were gay. They were gay jokes, and saying like the ball team in San Francisco has Michael Feinstein singing show tunes, that kind of thing. And I was in New York, and I found a book like in a thrift store. I always go to thrift stores looking for old records and music, and there was this book about gay in Hollywood or something like that, and there was a guy in it who was quoted, I forget his name, but he was on the writing staff of The Tonight Show. And I'm reading this, and it says they were all joking about what a queer Michael Feinstein is.
Oh my God.
Something to that effect, and he said that he quit the job shortly after that. But there was always a double standard. It's like Cole Porter. Cole Porter was one of the most extraordinary American songwriters, died in 1964, born in 1891. He lived primarily in Hollywood, on Rockingham, which is a street that is famous to different people for different reasons. But a writer named Leonard Spiegelgath, who was a gay writer who came to Hollywood in the 30s, I met him later in his life, and he was telling me about how in the 30s particularly, if you mention Cole Porter, they'd say, "Oh, he's a pansy, he's a pansy." And you say, "Well, I was at a dinner party. He was there." He was there? Yeah. Jesus, did he play the piano? What did he do? So there was always the double standard. Always the double standard. That's like, oh, he's a faggot. But then, oh, did he play the piano? Oh, he's a genius. And there was always that. there was also a guy I knew who grew up in Los Angeles who would introduce famous gay celebrities, closeted gay celebrities, men and women, to other people. So they could have liaisons. In the 30s, they could meet people. And this is not Scotty Bowers and all of that stuff. Right. This is before that. And this was just a young guy who introduced them to people so they could meet people, so they could find a community here, because it was so buried. And if you didn't have someone who could introduce you, then you were out.
And there is that double standards, you plus rights, and there's just this like, do you support or do you not support?
Right.
You can't be a fan of somebody and not accept all of that you're being a fan of.
That's right.
That must have been a very scary time for you, because you hit the scene and it was just propelled from there, and then to have to kind of experience that freedom coming here from Ohio, of that sexual kind of freedom, but then kind of having to put it in the back. But you were on stage with Rosemary Clooney, and there was like a little joke moment.
Oh, that was at the Greek Theater. Yeah, well,
just a small little venue.
Well, we did a couple of duets at the end of the show, beginning of the show, end of the show, and at the end of the show, Rosemary said something, and someone yelled out, "You go, girl!" And I looked at her. I said, "Do you think he's talking to you or me?" Got a big laugh from the audience. So I wasn't hiding anything.
Life would completely change when you met Ira Gershwin.
Yes.
As somebody who loves to meet icons, and we use that word so often now, it's kind of lost its true meaning. But when you're talking about Ira Gershwin, I get very excited when I have people like yourself come in, and it just you get this nervous, and you're just like yeah, exactly.
Do that again.
Like I don't know if I could. Can you share with us the feeling walking up to Ira Gershwin's door for the first time, and what it was like opening the door, and there he is, and there's this music icon?
For people who don't know who Ira Gershwin is, he wrote the lyrics to classic Gershwin songs, mainly in the 20s and 30s. His brother was George Gershwin, a composer who died July 11th, 1937, at the age of 38 from a brain tumor.
You're so good with dates.
Well,
he spent 6
on
years
paper.
With it. Yeah.
But like Cole Porter's birth and death.
Oh, those kind of dates.
Yeah,
right.
dates.
We're going to talk about your worst date experience.
Oh, God. Well, well, that's the stuff I know. I don't know anything else, but, play to your strength, right? But anyway, Ira Gershwin was 80 years old, and he was one of the most important songwriters in the history of the 20th century. He was a brilliant lyricist. And when I met him, I was quaking in my proverbial boots, because that's 1983. That's when I was 26 and Ira was 86. That's about 2 months before he passed away. And I'm playing the piano for him, and we moved the piano up to his bedroom. But I met Ira, and I was very nervous, because I was meeting somebody who was so legendary to me. We all have our idols, and to me, to meet someone who had touched such important parts of musical history, that was it for me. And he wrote "Someone to Watch Over Me" and "Love Is Here to Stay" and "I Got Rhythm" and all these songs. And he said, "Pardon me for not getting up," because he was not very mobile. And he was autographing a record that was made. It was demos he had made when he was young, of him singing. And he didn't sing very well, but they were historic. And I said, "I have that record." He said, "You have that record?" He said, "Why would you have that record?" I said, "Because I love your work." He said, "You're the first person outside of a relative I know who actually has this record." And then to make conversation, because I collected ancient records, 78s, I said, "Gee, Mr. Gershwin, I have a record from 1920 of gems from La La Lucille." In those days, they would make these records of medleys. They called it Gems from La La Lucille, the Broadway. And I said, "Oh, that must have the most popular songs from the show, Teodal Umbumbo and Nobody But You." And I said, "That's right." And his wife, Leonor, was sitting across the room with her sister, and she turned to her sister and said, "Isn't that cute? He's telling Ira that's right." So I was hired to work for them cataloging memorabilia and his phonograph record collection, and I ended up becoming his eyes and ears to the outside world, his representative to Gershwin projects, and eventually named his literary executor upon his demise. And it was a very heady time, because I was 20, and anybody at the age of 20, it's their formative years. And so I met Ira, and that was 9 months after I moved to Los Angeles. And then I was playing the piano in gay bars, playing in bars. They didn't have to be gay bars, but those were the bars that hired me because I played show tunes and I played old songs. And I was fired so many times because I couldn't play the pop stuff, but I was lousy at it. But the old stuff I could play. But that's what linked me up with all these legends that I was dying to meet. So I didn't care.
So you were ingratiated into this kind of music atmosphere, like high school. This is the music that you were listening to. You weren't listening to the new bops. You were listening to songs from the Great American Songbook.
Pretty much so. I mean, my sister listened to pop music, and I loved certain things like Carole King, Tapestry. There's certain things, Joni Mitchell. I mean, I listened to some pop music, but the preponderance of music that I listened to was classic because there was so much of it. And there's still all of these names that are obscure to most people, but they wrote thousands and thousands of songs. And so I want to find those songs and I want to bring them to people and share them because they're amazing. And they're timeless. They're timeless.
They last. I was just going to say they last.
They're like Shakespeare. People don't say, Shakespeare, that's old. Or you don't say Beethoven is old. Or you don't look at Michelangelo's work and say, oh, that's old. It's timeless.
Judy McAvoy, who's a piano player and performer from Springfield, wants to know, did Mr. Gershwin immediately entrust you with his library of songs, or was it a slow process gaining his trust and gaining access to some of these never-seen-before jewels?
Well, Judy.
We love Judy.
Yeah, thank you for that. It was a process, but when he realized that I spoke his language, the world changed. And I remember when it happened. I was playing 78s, old records, and he said, Mike, he said, I wrote that with George in 1937 for Shall We Dance? And I said, I know. He said, how do you know? I said, well, I know your work. And then he started quizzing me. And then he said, how old are you? I said, 20. He said, how many more are like you? Because he was so treated like, are there 20-year-olds who would know what I did? And one day we were talking about something. He said, well, that was 1931. I said, no, it was 1930. He said, no, it was 19. I said, Ira, it was 19, because by that time I was able to call him Ira. It's 1930, and I got a book, and I showed him Girl Crazy, and he said, okay, well, you have an advantage over me. I said, well, what is that? He said, well, I've only lived my life, but you've thoroughly researched it.
Dates.
Oh, and this is before Google. It's not like all this information was just pouring all over the place.
That's true. Well, Ira was a guy who had an encyclopedic memory, and there was an actor named Louis Calhern who was a wonderful character actor. And one day, an encyclopedia salesman went to his door. Door-to-door encyclopedia salesman used to go and try and sell these 20 volumes.
They used to have those.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
I had the World Book.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. So he knocked on the door of Louis Calhern, and he gave him the whole pitch, and Louis Calhern said, I don't need an encyclopedia. I know Ira Gershwin.
What were some of the most amazing finds in going through the research that you were even a fan, even so knowledgeable, even you were surprised on unearthing?
One of the most amazing things was finding artifacts that belonged to George Gershwin, things that he had touched. George Gershwin. Now remember, he died in 1937, and he had written Porgy and Bess. He wrote Rhapsody in Blue. He wrote concert works. He was. How would you compare him to someone today? Lin Manuel Miranda. I mean, he was known around the world. He was the most famous American musician, and he died so suddenly of a brain tumor. It was the most shocking news. And I had this bracelet, and Marvin Hamlish's sister, Terry Liebling, who was a casting director, had a Christmas party, and I was hired to play for it. And she said, we're going to have Peter Hurkos here. Peter Hurkos was a famous psychic who did psychometry. He would hold objects and he would do readings.
Oh God, I hope this isn't going where it's going.
And I brought this bracelet that had belonged to George Gershwin, and I handed it to Peter Hurkos, and he said, oh, my head hurts, my head hurts, my head. And he said, the person who died young, too young. They operated in the wrong place, and it was and George Gershwin died of a brain tumor at the age of 38, and he picked that up in this bracelet. And nobody told him anything. So that was pretty amazing.
But the bracelet is still safe.
I have the bracelet.
Okay, good.
It originally was like his watch, what you call it, a watch fob, and it had charms. And then Lin Gershwin turned it into a charm bracelet. So yeah, I have it. Yeah.
When do you wear it? Is it just for very special occasions?
I actually don't wear it anymore. I put it in a little box, and it's like a little frame, so it's a little display piece. But I do have other things that I have the tuxedo jacket that Ira wore to the opening of Porgy and Bess in 1935, and I have that. But people may not know who I have a friend who's a voice teacher, and one of her students said, "I'm going to sing Summertime by Porgy and Bess." So, there we go. So not everybody knows Porgy and Bess.
Music education.
During that time, you also befriended, of course, Rosemary Clooney, which we later worked with.
Yeah.
Did she just come over for like a cup of sugar, and then it was like, hey, let's hang out with Rosemary? That must have been nerve-wracking, too.
I loved Rosemary Clooney from the time I was a kid. There was something about her voice that just went to my heart chakra, that just touched me, and I longed to meet her. And she was Ira Gershwin's next-door neighbor. She lived in the house that Ira and George Gershwin had occupied in 1937 when they came to Hollywood to write film scores. And Ira lived on Roxbury Drive, and everybody famous lived on Roxbury Drive. Lucille Ball, Jack Benny, Jimmy Stewart.
Tippi Hedren did, too.
Tippi Hedren, Agnes Moorehead, the composer Sigmund Romberg, Joni James, later Robert Stigwood. It went on. Oscar Levant, my hero. Even Madonna lived there later, until they probably got persuaded her to please go. But Rosemary had a cat, and Lee Gershwin would buy bay shrimp from the fish market. And there we go. That's Rose. Oh golly, yeah, that's later. That's later. Yeah, Rosemary. But Rosemary had a cat, and the cat would always come next door and eat all of the shrimp that Lee Gershwin put. Lee Gershwin would put shrimp out for all the cats, and any cat within a 50-mile radius would come for the shrimp, because shrimp is addicting for cats, and they're not going to eat kibble. So Rosemary said, Lee Gershwin said, Rosemary Clooney is not taking care of her cat. This cat is starving. It's always coming over here and eating our food, and you've got to go over and tell her that she has to feed her cat. I said, do you really want me to do that? She said, yes, you have to do that. So that's how I met her. I went next door and said, Mrs. Gershwin told me to tell you that you're not feeding your cat. And she said, I know you. She said, Rosemary told me about you. Because Rosemary Clooney was touring in 4 Girls 4 with Rosemary, who was on the Dick Van Dyke Show, and her best friend was Richard Deacon, and Richard Deacon was my best friend because I'd met him at the Cabaret nightclub, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, she knew who I was. And she said, come on in, honey. And so I became like her. She called me her 6th kid. Aww. And I called her my Beverly Hills mom. And she sent a Christmas card one year to my mother. And my mother wrote her back, sent her a card back, and signed it, Michael's real mom. Not that she was threatened. But Rosemary and I ended up doing over 200 shows together. Yeah. And she generously agreed to sing on my first album, which got me some attention. And the first time I was on national television was Merv Griffin, and I asked her to come on with me because I was so scared, and she came on with me. So I will adore her forever.
Did you have a favorite of all of those that you ever did, like television show-wise, when we had more like variety show friendly type of environments?
A favorite show?
Like a show you went on, like Merv Griffin, or my dream was always to be on Letterman, and then I got there and it was freezing and it was underwhelming, but like any of those types of like late night shows.
They don't make shows like that at all anymore. Daytime, evening, it's just not.
Oh God! Well, on the Tonight Show, when I sang Moondance, and I got to work with the band the first time I did the Tonight Show, and it was after Johnny because he would never have me on, but Jay Leno did, and singing with that band, that iconic band. That was something.
Good.
Yeah.
Now, you hit the scene. One of the questions we got is how you made that transition from working for Ira Gershwin to kind of developing your own. You were music coordinator in 1983 for My One and Only. But how did that transition kind of
That was a nightmare, but that's...
Why?
But go on.
Spill the tea, girl. Did I say spill the tea, girl? Michael Feinstein.
You can't take it back now.
Yeah.
Spill the beans, boy. Spill the... No, not going to work. See, we don't have rewind anymore. You don't hear that sound of... The tape goes back.
It sounded like a cat hungry for shrimp.
Uh-oh.
Why was that such a nightmare? Because that was your first kind of big project, right?
Just
Well-
for the listeners, my one and only is Tommy Tune.
Tommy Tune and Twiggy.
Thank you.
Tommy Tune and Twiggy. Yeah.
Well, it's not me and my girl. It's my
Yeah,
one and only.
My one and only.
Yeah, no, it was a show that was a musical made up of classic Gershwin
Right.
songs, and they sent me to be there, and they were changing all the lyrics and they were screwing around with the songs, and I was there to make sure that everything was right, and every time I'd say that something was wrong, they would excoriate me and
Yeah.
tell me to get the F out of Boston where it was trying. I mean, I was the bad guy, and everybody ended up hating me. And Ira was very upset that they were changing his rhymes
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
he
of
worked.
course.
They were changing his rhymes, like the song "Strike Up the Band" that was closing the first act of the show, and the original lyric, "Let the drums roll out, let the trumpets call, while the people shout, strike up the band, hear the cymbals ring, calling one and all. To the martial swing, strike up the band." So what they done is hear the cymbals ring, calling one and all, strike up the band. And I said, that changes the rhyme scheme. And so I called Ira, and he said, well, have them to hear the cymbals ring, calling one and all. Now's the time to swing, like swing in action, strike up the band. And they wouldn't put it in. So I said, no, you can't do this. and they hated me. And then Lee Gershwin said, come home. I said, why? She said, because if the show fails, they'll blame us. I said, okay. So I was gone. And that was the end of that. So it was very frustrating.
God, I can imagine. Especially,
But the show was a success, and Ira was very pleased about that. So that's the most important thing.
So how did that transition happen then?
The transition?
Yep.
Well, after Ira died in August of 1983, 86 years old, and I was in his will as his literary executor. And after he died, Leonard Gershwin and I had a big falling out over something I consider to be petty, and she later did too. And so she was able to maneuver me out of my position as his executor. And so I went back to playing piano bars, even though I was still doing it, but I didn't know what else to do, so I was playing piano bars. And then I got hired to play at the Mondrian Hotel, which was a new hotel, and suddenly I became the flavor of the month. Everybody was coming in to see me. And I had met Liza Minnelli, because I knew her father very well, who was close friends with the Gershwins, and she was named after the Gershwin song Liza. Right. And she started coming into the Mondrian every night. Oh, yeah. That's a nice shot. That was about 6 months ago, I think. Yeah.
She was a sensation. My phone was blowing up like, you have to get to Feinstein's right now. And I'm like, I can't get there. Everybody was calling each other. Insane. She just pops up. She's like,
yeah, and she got up and sang and
yeah.
chatted with. Yeah, it was fun. It was a fun night. But
just
anyway,
a night in LA,
But Liza threw a party for me. She said, we're going to host your opening night. I said, but I've already opened. She said, no one knows that. She said, we're going to have an opening night. So she got her publicist to have an opening night for me. And she had introduced me to Elizabeth Taylor. And Elizabeth said, I'm going to stay one more night. I'm supposed to go to London the day your party, but I'm going to postpone it one night so I can come to your party. And she came, and Joan Collins came, and Liza was there, and Henry Mancini, and Gregory Peck, and Melissa Manchester, and I mean, the list goes on and on. It was the kind of party, if it hadn't been thrown for me, I certainly wouldn't have been invited to. And that was the thing that really put me on the map. So that got me attention for being at the Mondrian, and then from there I got an invitation to play at the Plush Room in San Francisco, or as the great drag artist Charles Pierce used to say, the Yuck Room of the Tush Hotel, the Plush Room of the York Hotel. And I played for him as well. I have a whole history of playing for drag artists back in the day. And then I got an offer to play the Algonquin Hotel in New York. And then I got a New York Times review, and then less than a year later I was playing the Hollywood Bowl, and I was on Broadway. And it just went from there. So it was very, very quick. And it's because I was doing this old music.
Now, about doing the old music, what do you think worked about the combination? Was it because you were so young that the older crowd loved seeing somebody young appreciate it, and the younger crowd, felt your young energy, and then they were introduced to older music? What was that winning combo that made you singing this kind of music particularly so popular?
I have no idea. I don't know. I guess it was there were people who were hungry to hear this music. Because remember, going back that many years, 30 years ago, people were hungry to hear it, and they weren't hearing it. And it was, I guess, unusual to be able to go someplace to hear this music. But everybody came in. I mean, George Michael, when George came to L.A. for the first time with Wham, he came in and we hung out, and he had no knowledge of classic songs, but he ate these things up. And Liza said, play him Gershwin. And I played It Ain't Necessarily So. And he said, wait a minute, isn't that like, what was it, Bronski Beat or Taco or one of those groups? It ain't necessarily so. And he said, it ain't. I said, well, that's interesting. I said, but it was written as a hemiola, 2 against 3. It ain't necessarily so. And that's the thing. He said, I like it. It ain't necessarily. I said, okay, that's valid, you know. And I met Elvis Costello, and Paul Jabara used to come in, who wrote, you know, all the big disco songs, and had a very embarrassing moment where he wrote a song that was absolutely racist, that he had his boombox and he did this song. He thought it was a tribute to people that it was not a tribute to. And I thought, this is not good. And that song never was recorded or put anywhere. But it still burns in my memory, especially the reactions of the people of color who were in the audience. That was something.
Now, also working in that environment, we know some of the big names that you were working with at such a young age. Did you ever feel a little lonely and isolated because you were dealing with certain people of a certain level with these big names and big histories, but it wasn't like you were hanging out with 20-something-year-olds on your own?
Well, I was trying.
Well, but that's what I mean. Was it a little isolating? Was it a little lonely because your environment was with classic music, with these older kind of stars? Even the big Hollywood parties that you were going to were full of these older, more mature type of celebrities. And we know you can make friends with celebrities, but you don't really connect on a certain level until you do, which you have because you've been in the business and you've earned their trust. But I'm sure it must have been a little lonely for the first few years of success.
Well, no, in the sense that after I'd play the parties, I'd go to the bars and I'd hang out with, and I had formed a community, even though it was hard for me because I didn't like going to bars where there was loud music.
Yeah.
But
that makes sense.
There were a lot of places where there was not loud music. I haven't hung out in West Hollywood in a long time, but recently a friend we've been going there, hanging out and going to places, but it's so loud. I mean, it's loud. And there used to be so many places you could go where you could talk and it was quiet and there were different kinds of music, either a DJ playing quieter music or a pianist or something. And a lot of times the places where there was no live music, they were hustler bars for older men to meet younger guys.
100%.
And so I would go to those places because it was a place that I could talk, and my reputation suffered for that for a while. But there was a wonderful community of people I could hang out with. And when I played piano bars, I'd play till 2 a.m. And then we'd always go to the Thai or Chinese restaurants on Hollywood Boulevard or Sunset because they were open till 4. And we had our routine.
Yeah.
And we partied. You know, it was such a free time.
Now, did you ever make any mistakes or did you have a lot of shenanigans with the success and with that fame, but you also being part of the party life? Did that ever get in the way?
Well, one time I was on Larry King's radio show in Miami, and I was stoned. And he asked me, much to my surprise, to sing a song. He had a piano there, and I wasn't expecting that.
They didn't tell you?
No.
Oh, my God.
And I sat down and started singing and playing, and I forgot what I was doing. And there was that moment of, oh, my God! And the chord came back, and I kept going. And I thought, I will never let this happen again. Yeah. And it was marijuana. It wasn't anything stronger than that because I couldn't handle anything. I could hardly handle that. But that was his radio show before he did the TV show. Yeah. It was a nighttime national, millions of people. And I thought, oh my God! But I got through that. But I was so shaken by that. I was so shaken that I was like, okay, clean up your act, kid, and I did.
Because people in the 80s and 90s, notoriously, like the young actors, it would ruin their career, that kind of party life.
That's such a random surprise, though. Usually when
That
you go to
is.
do radio, you're not expecting any type of piano to be there.
Right.
Or singing because, who knows what you're going to get and reverb and you don't want to, or it's 6 a.m. So
Yeah.
I'll have to do some Googling later.
Well,
you're
it's so
high.
I don't know if it's so obscure, but the thing that's interesting is that when I started to get a little notoriety, there used to be personal ads in all the gay rags, and
Oh, that's right.
I became a type. Where I used to looking for Michael Feinstein type, and I had the
That's flattering.
taped on my refrigerator. Looking for Michael Feinstein type, but I never had the nerve to call and say, "Hi, this is Michael Feinstein."
Imagine. That would be a shock.
But I was a type once.
Yes.
So.
Oh, you're still a type, girl. We got this question from an artist themselves. What is your creative process to approaching a well-known song that we all know and love, but how do you make it your own while still honoring the original song?
First thing is to approach the song as if it's a new song, as if nobody has ever heard it before. And it's always lyric driven for me. It's always about the words. And I trust that the rest will come. And if I don't feel that I can bring something unique or different to the interpretation, I won't sing it. But the way I'm able to sing songs over and over again is because it's fresh every time. And maybe it's because my memory in that way is not so great, even though I can remember facts and dates and stuff. But it's always got to be new. But it is the lyric, and it's taking the lyric and reading it and, first of all, speaking it the way I would say it in conversation, and then developing a story behind it. Liza taught me about having a backstory, and then singing it as if you're singing it to that person or to the audience or looking in the eyes of the people. And when I do a class where I'm working with young people, the hardest part for them is to look at somebody or look into the eyes of somebody when they're singing, because it's so terrifying.
It's intimate.
To be able to look at somebody and say, "It's very clear, our love is here to stay." That's hard.
Yeah, it is. Especially in our world, we're all scrolling and we're all, not
Right.
connected.
That was
Yes.
my favorite part about listening to the album a time and a half today, is that you really understand the story of the lyric because you're a storyteller and all the other artists, featured artists, are just such great storytellers. I was listening to how Alison was like shaping her vowels and
Oh,
like
man.
cutting through the butter and like not changing the melody, but just like the grace notes here and there. And it just was, I listened to the songs in a completely different way because the story was first. I loved
Thank you.
that.
The idea of doing Gershwin Country is that I just hope that if anybody hears it, they'll just hear them as songs. You don't have to know anything. It's just, you either like it or you don't. And so that was the thing, that I thought these are great songs, and if you just record them telling the stories, that's enough. Because so often when people interpret classic songs, they think they have to do something.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
like I saw a revival of Follies, the last revival of Follies in New York, and those actors, greatly talented people, some of them were just pushing and pushing and pushing. It's like, just let the song do the work for
Yeah.
you.
Literally had this conversation yesterday with somebody who loves theater. And we
I
talked
heard that
about,
conversation.
Yes, you probably did. My voice is loud enough. But it was about the production. It's like everybody was trying so hard, and it lost the intimacy, it lost the chemistry, and it lost the love of it. It was pounded so hard because it was just trying to be an imitation of the greats, or because we know some of the songs. And you sang "Somewhere Over the Rainbow," and your version is so beautiful because it wasn't trying to copy something else that was going on.
Yes.
And that production, it's prime example of that.
Yes.
Whether
How
it's
long ago was that production?
What, 5 years, 6 years,
Yeah.
something like that?
Elaine Page was in it.
Oh, she was great.
Bernadette Peters was in it.
Yes.
In New York, not here.
It came here, but I
think I saw
Elaine
it
Page
here.
was the only one. I saw it in New York and I saw it here. It was even worse here, but LA audience didn't know the difference. They were like, "Oh, we love it." No, just kidding. But it was so lifeless. Which, how do you make Follies lifeless? And
It was my
it was a
first.
travesty.
Seeing that in LA, I just remember Sammy. Why am I blanking on his last name? Paul.
Davis Jr.?
No, Paul in chorus line. Sammy Come on.
Sammy Williams?
Sammy Williams, yes,
Yeah.
was in the production.
Oh,
and
he was great.
He was such an icon to
Oh,
me,
wow,
and he was
yeah.
so mean to me when we worked together.
Oh, no. Don't meet your heroes. Don't meet your heroes.
Well, you know, that's a whole other episode. But I just didn't know the piece, and I was kind of just like,
Yeah.
but that was a new introduction of that piece to me. Just like those songs on Gershwin Country are going to be so
that's
many
nice.
people's first time hearing those songs. That made me really excited.
Well, thank you. It's fun because when funny, I should say, when I played in piano bars, even going back in the day, I'd play like, they all laughed at Christopher Columbus, and someone would come to me and say, that's great. Did you write that? If you don't know a song,
Yeah.
that's perfectly legit question. And I hope that people say, wow, did he write those? Or did Dolly write Love Is Here to Stay? Whatever, that's fine with me.
Now you talked about don't meet your legends. You seem to have become close friends and collaborators with every person you've met. But has there been a standout celebrity meeting that you were like, wow, that was not fun?
Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Oh, he hates women.
He hates what?
He hates women.
Oh.
Evita,
That's
E
just
flat,
the.
E flat,
I
F.
think I might have read that in Patty's book.
Yeah.
She has the pool,
Oh,
the Andrew
well,
Lloyd Webber pool.
Well, I saw Sunset Boulevard in England with Patty in it, and Kevin, oh, he was so wonderful. Kevin, oh God, forgive me, Kevin.
Not Klein.
No.
Anderson.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was great. But it was not a good show. I mean, I'm sorry, but it was not a good show. Patty was, Patty, she was great. So I went backstage and she said, Michael, promise me you'll never work with Andrew Lloyd Webber. I said, Patty, that is the easiest promise I have ever made. Because I was playing a party for Walter and Lee Annenberg. They were the closest friends of the Reagans, and I was hired to play New Year's Day every year for the kitchen cabinet. And even though my politics were very, very different, and everyone would say, you got to tell Reagan this, you got to tell him that. And I say, I'm hired, I can't, I'm doing a job. And
Happy New Year.
right, you do your job. It's not my place. And as people, they were, for the most part, wonderful people. And that's the thing, is that there's politics and then there's people, and it gets into a whole different thing. But I got there early because I'd taken a red eye from New York because I worked New Year's Eve in New York. And Nancy Reagan said, guess who's coming to dinner? And I said, Sidney Poitier. And she said, no, Andrew Lloyd Webber. And I said, oh, shit. And she said, what's wrong? I said, well, I don't play, I'm not a... And she said, well, you should play something of it. I said, I don't...
When there's that New Year's Eve song in Sunset Boulevard, too.
Well, this is before Sunset Boulevard was written.
Phew. They would
Yeah,
play
this-
a perfect year.
Yeah, that's before it was written. And Don Black, who wrote the lyrics, is a great guy and talented. I said, please don't ask me to play anything by him because I don't want to embarrass him or embarrass me, And later that night, as I was playing and everybody came in after dinner, Walter said, Michael Feinstein is going to play us a medley of songs by Andrew Lloyd Webber. I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? And he was standing there with his arms crossed like, I dare you. And it's funny because when I was playing earlier, he never spoke to me or acknowledged me. His wife at that time was Sarah Brightman, and she was wonderful and sweet and was very encouraging and smiling, and she was great. But he was like ignoring me, and I thought, okay, whatever, that's fine. But he was looking at me like defiantly, and I thought, I'm just the piano player, And I thought, oh no, what am I going to do? But I played Don't Cry For Me, Argentina enough time for girl singers in clubs that I thought I can. So when it won't be easy, you'll think it's strange when I try to explain how I feel, that I still need your love. I was going through it. And then I got to, and as for fortune, and as for fame, and I couldn't think of the next line. And I said,
Oh wait, you were singing and playing.
Yeah.
Oh.
I was singing because he
I
said,
thought you were just playing.
no.
I
was
never invited them in.
No, I was singing. And so I was singing, and as for fortune, as for fame, and I couldn't think of the line. And I looked up and said, and he had his arm. I said, can you help me? And he said, I didn't write the words.
Oh God.
And I was mortified.
Oh.
He could have made that such a charming moment.
And so anyway, I just kind of, Peter. So that's why. I mean, it was just mortifying, and I don't know
He's
what was
jealous.
Well, no, please. I don't know what was going on with him, but it was.
He's English, so.
No, I mean.
He was married to a woman.
I've heard that
dear.
so many times, is that not only does he write, not understanding how a woman's voice works, 8 shows a week, and you did
Just
it, Evita, right?
I've done it twice, 8 shows a week. I did it at the the Lawrence Welk Dinner Theater. 6 of
Wonderful,
those 8
wonderful.
shows were matinees.
Where's the Lawrence Welk Theater?
It's out in Escondido. And then I did it at another dinner theater.
Escondido, where
And
the wind
Claremont
comes
is
sweeping
just
down.
like, oh
my God, so you really did it.
Yeah, they don't do Evita, the proverbial they, without matinee Avas. It's hard.
Yep.
I did all my shows. 6 of the matinees were, it was 8 shows a week and only 2 of them were evening performances because it's dinner theater.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
You
yeah,
want
yeah.
people awake when they see the shows.
That crowd is like 8 p.m. Gotta go.
But all of his roles are just like, so. I'm sorry that happened to you, but I never invited them in. I'll think of you every time.
Right, that's the line. That's the line. Do you know what that lyric means?
As for fortune, as for fame, I never invited them in.
They just happened to her.
Though it
She
seemed to
didn't-
the world they were all I desired, their illusions.
It happened because
She was poor.
no,
and-
but it was her being like, I wasn't wanting this. I wasn't looking for it, but it happened because I'm so fabulous.
Charles Pierce used to do an Ava Perón impression. He did a thing. It was the greatest sight gag I've ever seen, where he had his back to the audience with the bun and the whole thing with the arms out, and then slowly he would like turn around with his feet like coming around, and as he came around, he had this prosthetic thing attached that was a podium with microphones.
That's hilarious.
And it was brilliant. And he would say, "People of Argentina, years from now, when you speak of this, and you won't." He was deadly. He was so great. Anyway, sorry.
Now, Michael, when did you first start realizing that not only were you collaborating with big names, but you eventually were a big name? When did that first kind of realization happen? You're like, oh, I'm not the young kid on the block anymore. I'm the successful icon that people are talking about.
I'm not an icon, but when I played the Hollywood Bowl, that was 17,000 people, and that was the beginning. But from there, I played Broadway, and in that period, I knew I had in some way arrived. But I was so scared and so unprepared and so at times ill-behaved because I was just so scared.
Ill-behaved. How so?
Well, when people get scared, and including myself, there's bad behavior because it's like Eartha Kitt, whom I came to know, love, and adore. When I first met Eartha, I was to accompany her. I was hosting a television show called Talk Live, I think. And she was the guest, and I was to accompany her singing My Funny Valentine. She was cold as ice and very snippy and not very pleasant. But after I accompanied her, we rehearsed, and then, oh, darling, it was wonderful. But she was scared. And I got it. I got it because when I was scared, I would yell at everybody, and this isn't right, and it was bad because I was not knowing what to do, and I didn't have a support system. I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to calm myself and to take a breath and to focus. I mean, no, I knew how to focus, but sometimes the preparation for me was very hard.
And you've been there to see people at their most vulnerable, and you have worked with performers that are great performers, not the best singers. And you've worked with people towards the end of their career where, they weren't able to hit the original notes that they recorded or were known for. And so you've really seen people in a very naked way. That must be very enchanting is the same way as scary for you. Even it's like having to build that rapport and kind of having to see that.
Well, I'm not sure how to answer that. I mean, there are everybody has their process, and all everybody wants who is an entertainer is to touch the hearts of somebody else. That's the goal. It's just to connect with people. And I suppose many people become entertainers because they have this yearning to feel a connection with humanity, or to feel a connection in ourselves, or to make ourselves feel more alive or better. And I've met people who live for show business and completely identify their ego, their identity is success. And then there were people like Rosemary Clooney who had been there, done that, and had a nervous breakdown and lost everything and came back, where I understood. And from Ira Gershwin, people I came to learn that, to quote the line by Comden and Green, fame, if you win it, comes and goes in a minute. Where's the real stuff in life to cling to? So people who have this need to have notoriety or be famous. I have such compassion, because at the beginning, that's what I wanted, because I didn't understand, even though it was all about the music, but still, it's all about finding love. It's all about how we find love. That's all it is. Everything. That's what everything is.
All right, we're going to take a little sneak listen at Gershwin Country, and when we come back, we are going to talk all about it. Gershwin Country.
Oh, sweet and lovely, lady, be good. Oh, lady, be good to me.
No, no, they can't take that away from me. Someone to watch
Available now, Gershwin Country. So, the album was kind of inspired by a conversation with Maya Angelou. Is that true?
Maya
Yeah,
Angelou.
Angelou.
Yes. Yes.
Is that the most random thing? Country music came from this kind of conversation.
Well, the weird thing is that it's a Gershwin connection, because everything, like everybody I met, goes back somehow to Gershwin. Because Ira Gershwin was friends with Milton Ager, a songwriter who wrote Hard Hearted Hannah and Ain't She Sweet. His daughter was Shana Alexander, who used to be on 60 Minutes doing this Point Counterpoint, a great writer who wrote a book about Patty Hearst. She became a close friend of mine, and her best friend was Maya Angelou, because they were writers. And I met Maya through Shana Alexander, and Maya and I became friends. We became very close friends, and we wrote a song together for Lincoln's 200th birthday, and I was staying with her in Winston-Salem. And she started talking about her love for country music. She loved all kinds of music, and she could recite the poetry of the Robbie Burns with the accent, and anything that came out of her mouth was extraordinary. And she started talking about, I love these pictures. Oh my God, it's like doing archaeology of my own remains or something.
This is your life.
Yes, and that's
Dig,
Catherine
honey,
Russell
dig.
on the left, with whom I'm singing in New York at Zankhill Hall on April 6th. And, oh my gosh, LaTanya. Anyway, Maya she gave me a syllabus in country music. Like, I'd listened to country music. I'm from Ohio, and when I was a kid, I actually had a twang that somehow I lost along the way. I did. But anyway, I asked if she would consider producing a country album with me, and she said yes. And then she died. And so there was that. It was done. And then a few years ago, I woke up one morning with this idea of Gershwin Country. And it was one of those morning reveries where you don't know if it was just a thought wafting through. And then I kept thinking about it, and I realized that maybe it was a good idea, even though anyone I mentioned it, she said, "What? What are you talking about? Gershwin Country? No." But I had an idea of what it was, and then I was aligned with an amazing producer, Grammy-winning producer, Kyle Lenning, who worked with Randy Travis and Ronnie Millsap and so many legends, and Alison Krauss, and he got it, So he was amazing. He got the right guys in Nashville, the right Nashville band, and he helped me to find the right duet partners and figure out the routines. And we listened to hours and hours of early Gershwin. And then Liza executive produced, because her father was best friends with the Gershwins. His favorite song was Embraceable You. Her mother was in the movie Girl Crazy, and she was wonderful, making suggestions for songs and singers and casting and all that. And it took several years. It was the only time I worked on a project where we had no delivery date. Mm-hmm. I mean, we just were working on it till it was ready, because it took so much time to figure it out, because I didn't want it to be a duet album where the guy sings 8 bars in this key, and then the girl sings 8 bars in her key, and then the boy sings 8 bars and the girl sings it like phoned in. Yeah. This is the polar opposite of that, where each line, it tells a story, and there's a reason that these people are singing together.
That says a lot in the way that if you think about production of certain albums that I listen to, I can tell when they were not recorded at the same studio and they were recorded later, and but listening to it production-wise, because I listened in my studio before I listened in the bathtub, But I listened on my rig, like with my good speakers, because that's how I usually like to experience albums for the first time. And it sounds like it's all done at the same time and very consistent.
Oh, thank you. Well, a lot of it is. I mean, about 60% of the duets were recorded live with Alison and with Lyle Lovett. I went to Houston, and with Ronnie, Mandy Barnett, and Amy Grant, and the Time Jumpers doing Fascinating Rhythm. And so that was the paramount thing. That was the paramount point, that it's an interplay. It's an interplay. And it's been on the charts. I mean, whoever thought a Jew would be on the country charts? The top 10 of the country charts. So there we go.
Mazel tov.
We chatted for Metrosource magazine. Everything kind of came to life after the first recording session, which was with Dolly Parton, that perhaps this is maybe among your most favorite albums ever.
Yes.
What is it about this album that makes that so?
Maybe because it's not all me.
You are your worst critic.
In many ways, yes. But it's the collaboration. It's the collaboration. And because I worked with so many great musicians, and to be in the studio and to be doing Fascinating Rhythm, and when the fiddles are playing, it's like, oh, when they come in again, can we do this in harmony? Or can we take this up a half a step? Or let's try for the ending, Fascinating Rhythm, Fascinating Rhythm, Fascinating Rhythm. We'd figure it out and we'd do it. Or to spontaneously insert the Andy Griffith theme song into I Got Rhythm, those sorts of things. I mean, that was amazing, because it was like having a genie in a bottle, because anything you wished for, there it was. And then reinterpreting the songs through the heart and mind and soul of my duet partner with whom I was singing changed the way that I sang them. So it was all of that.
It's like a master class.
For me, it was.
Yeah.
For me, it was.
That's what I'm most, like, the first thing I wanted to know, because I kept looking and looking and looking online, because so many times now with the digital, we don't get to have our hands on the liner notes. And I'm like, I want to know all about the orchestrators and who was, singing background vocals and who were the strings. And I would love to hear just a little bit about the orchestration process. And because Nashville, there are some great, wonderful musicians there of every caliber, but a lot of people don't know about the numbering system. It's a completely different experience with the way you can get the same product, but a lot of people that go there don't understand it. It's like just kind of like reading Greek.
Yes, the numbering system. That is a system that I presume was evolved in Nashville, that is a way of reading music that is in some ways simple, in some ways complex, but it's numbers that denote the intervals. Is that the right way to put it, Laura?
Yeah, it's kind of like solfege with numbers.
Yeah, and you can take it, and it's a roadmap, but you can do it in any key. In other words, it's a roadmap, but let's do it in C, let's do it in D. But I'm accustomed to an orchestration being written out in a full score that's 30 pages, and you pay God knows how much money for it, justifiably so. And then the entire arrangement of any of those songs, it was on one page. Numbering system. And Brian Sutton, who's one of the great Nashville artists, just great guitarists, he did some of the arrangements, and Victor Krauss, Alison's brother, who's a bassist, did some of them. It just was, they had these charts. They were frozen. I had permanent number charts made of the final product. And it was like, yeah, there you go. There's your charts. It's like, oh, thanks. I'm good to go.
Yep.
So, and these also are musicians who are in many cases very well trained and can read full scores, and they're fully trained musicians for sessions and such, so they can do it all. And some of them I had worked with when I played with the Nashville Symphony, and it was just, it's quite a place, Nashville.
It sounds like it's a whole different language.
It is.
Yeah, and all of the experiences that I've had where it's more creative instead of just like you have to follow the ants on the paper. That you can feel, I could feel that when I was listening. It's like more heart, more freedom of musical expression, and I appreciated it very much.
Thank you. Tanya Hansharoff did a lot of the choral accompaniment, and she was indispensable to this album. I want to give her a shout out because she was fantastic. And there's no piano on it because I'm a pianist, and I thought it'd be fun to not have any piano. It's all Nashville, great classic Nashville instruments, but no piano.
It definitely is, like you said, the first time listening to it, it's like I've heard the song for the first time, and it's really exciting. You kind of want to skip ahead because you say, what did they do with this, and what did they do with that? It really is a journey, and I can imagine a bunch of country music fans are going to be hearing this music for the first time, especially the younger generation.
That's very exciting.
It is very exciting. Michael, we've seen you mature, we've seen you grow on stage, TV, in your music. How has your relationship to the Gershwin music changed as you've gotten older?
First, as a person who plays the sheet music exactly as it is. And what people don't know is that don't understand, I should say, is that when you interpret songs, you're always doing chord substitutions in different things, in different interpretive things. Because if you sing Someone to Watch Over Me, the way it's written, it was written with a lilt. There's a somebody I'm longing to see. I hope that he turns out. That's how it's written. So I was never a purist in that sense. But I did have tremendous respect and do for the lyrics and for the certain elements. However, I've become more open to other types of interpretations, more so than Ira Gershwin was, who didn't like certain interpretations of his songs. But if they
didn't like reinterpretations,
oh boy,
Betty Buckley sent him a recording of her doing a jazz interpretation. He's like, "Don't do that again."
Yeah,
like, sorry.
And then she sang it at a tribute to him.
I know.
After that,
Betty, what are you doing, Betty? Looking back, what has been a crowning achievement, not professionally, but personally? Having all these experiences, having your successes, getting married. What's been that moment you're like, personally, this is my crowning achievement?
Becoming happier in my soul. Finding peace. It's just about finding peace. Just finding peace. Because I love music, and music is a means of healing and transformation, and is an incredibly important, I was going to say commodity, substance to uplift and help the world, and people still don't have a clue about what is possible with music. I mean, people don't understand what is imbued in music as far as healing and vibrations and transformation. It's incredibly powerful, and it's so underused. And so I have become much more deeply involved in a very private way with music and healing, and finding ways to help people in whatever way I can. And one of the ways that I've achieved peace is to come to the fundamental realization that every single person with whom we come in contact is purposeful and meaningful, and it's no less purposeful than being in front of 1,000 people or 10,000 people. There is no difference. It's just how we connect with another person in the moment. That's all that matters. That's it.
What do you think the future of the Great American, what does that mean for the Great American Songbook?
Art today is so different than it was in years past, fundamentally, because it is delivered in a way that diminishes the power to some degree of music, yet it's reaching more people than ever. So that's the part to celebrate, which is fantastic. And with technology being what it is, the potential for reaching more people is tremendous. And because of technology, this music will live on in some way forever. I have no way of knowing what the prognosis is specifically for American popular song of the classic era, but I do know that it fulfills a certain purpose and has a certain meaning for people that are exposed to it that will always be thus. It will always fulfill that function, and therefore I know it will live on. And I believe that it will grow in time because it is so filled with spirituality and transformation and with love. And it opens the heart in a certain way that will always be essential.
You have shared so much of yourself for this interview, and I can't thank you enough. you know, you get to see the power and the passion behind what we see on screen or what we're listening to through your albums, and it is an amazing experience to be able to hear your stories firsthand and for you to be so open about your journey. I think it's very inspirational to artists of any levels.
That's very nice. Thank you. I am one with every artist who has ever tried to create anything. It is, we are all the same. And that's what Maya said to me, and I've never forgotten that.
I just want to like take a breath and like soak this all in. Michael, what would a song about your life be called?
I don't know. Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered. Something with lots of Jewish guilt in it. Oy vey Maria. I don't know. Something about celebration. Or maybe Love is Here to Stay. Love is Here to Stay is certainly a philosophy that I believe, and especially the verse. The more I read the papers, the less I comprehend the world and all its capers and how it all will end. Nothing seems to be lasting, but that isn't our affair. We've got something permanent, I mean in the way we care.
That's another favorite thing about the album for me is that you hear so many of the verses.
Yes, the verses. Yes, the introductory parts that they always
That
cut off.
not a
like-
lot of people know.
It's like cutting the crusts off the bread.
Who does that? Those are carbs you're giving
It's
up.
like gluten-free Gershwin.
That's the name of the next album.
Michael, you are hitting. You're back on tour. You're touring with the album. You're popping up everywhere. You go to michaelfeinstein.com to find out where he is coming to a city near you. Are you scared at all about going back to live performances across the nation?
No, not at all. I had COVID in January, and I'm not scared. We have to learn to live without fear. We have to be mindful and careful, but I am tired of living with fear.
Do you have any final questions for Mr.
I should
Michael
have called
Feinstein?
you. I had COVID in January too.
We could have
We could have a COVID
talked
party.
every day.
Yeah, I
COVID
got
concert.
it from doing a gig with my dectet. Our pianist was just
those
going down.
dectets.
I know, right?
Well, really, but what about the music?
I want the quick question that I have for the listeners,
Sorry.
because I just came back from San Francisco and I've been spending a lot of time there. And what you said about how I don't remember exactly what the words were, but when I'm there, I always feel safe. I feel accepted. But I didn't know you had a place there.
Yes.
So what are the locations for our listeners? There's San Francisco,
Los
Angeles, 54, Feinstein's 54 Below.
New York, and then Indiana, Carmel,
Indiana.
which is a suburb of, contiguous to Indianapolis, not a suburb.
So
Carmel.
4 locations.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Get out and
we're
support,
looking at one
folks.
overseas, actually, that I'm excited about.
I'll be there opening night.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yes.
Have you ever thought about doing I'm sure you do a lot of the cruises where they have themes and performances, but like, have you done one that's just you? Like Feinstein's cruise that's just you're in charge of everything?
No, because I need too much Dramamine. I've done a couple of the Playbill cruises, and I'm not
Not a fan.
I'm not.
I've never been
I'm
on
not a
one.
good sailor. Let's put it that way.
But it is a very good idea.
We could do it in the only time I've been on a cruise ship is when it was docked. You could do a show on a docked cruise ship.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Feinstein's
Ship of
afloat.
Fools.
This has been great. Love the album.
So
Congratulations.
great. Real fast. And then you and Liza ended up staying up playing through the
All
night.
night,
And
yes.
that was the first time you had met.
We had met before. Actually, we'd met a couple times before, but that's when we clicked. I mean, it was funny because I was playing all these Christmas parties, and she would say, "Come and meet me at Nucleus Nuance on Melrose." Come and meet me there. And I would go there after the party, and I would wait, and the maitre d' said, "Can I help you while I'm waiting for Liza Minnelli?" Go, "Yeah." And she never showed, and I was so humiliated. And it happened like 3 times. She never showed up. And then it was at her father's Christmas party, and I said, "You never showed up." She said, "Oh, I'm sorry, honey. I'm sorry, you know." It was whatever. But anyway, she said, "From now on, we're joined at the hip." And I said, "Yeah." But then she came in the next night to the Mondrian Hotel, and she came in every night, and we've been connected ever since.
It's so wonderful to see you perform. And even like, on Instagram, your little videos that you're just hanging around the house, just jamming with Liza Minnelli. to see your friendship really grow through the years and everything it's very touching. And of course, my gays wanted me to ask you about your relationship. So,
Yeah, she's such a kind person, and so compassionate, and really is the truest friend one could hope for, because she so understands human nature and what people need. And if you have a problem, she is Florence Nightingale. I mean, she will do anything for her friends. She will, and she's proudly sober for many years, and whatever she deals with now, she has such optimism, and she has happiness in her life in a way that she's never had before, and that is the most happy thing to see. And she says, you know, I wake up every morning and I think, what do I have to do today? Nothing. And then she calls me and says, Michael, let's rehearse some songs.
Producing and being in the studio in that process?
Well, she's the greatest director because her father, Vincent Minnelli, was one of the great Hollywood directors, and she has the most amazing eye. When we went to see La La Land, we went to a screening of La La Land, and she said, see that? Now the camera should be over here, and you see that thing up there, and see that color? That color would be better if it was over here. And I had never looked at a film that way. I mean, you talk about seeing detail in this. It's uncanny, but it is natural to her as anything, because she just grew up with it.
No.
You know, about the lighting angle, all of it. It's extraordinary. There she is with her dad. That's early. That's when she was probably in her late teens. Yeah. And Vincent was one of the great Hollywood directors, of course, but he started as a scenic designer and a costume designer. And so he had this eye for every aspect of a picture. And how many other Hollywood directors could direct a drama like Some Came Running, and then direct Gigi, and then direct a comedy like Father of the Bride, or The Long Long Trailer with Lucille Ball, and then the greatest musicals, The Bandwagon with Fred Astaire, and An American in Paris with Gene Kelly, and On a Clear Day with Barbra Streisand. Vincent had all of that. He could do it all. And he was amazing because he didn't speak much, but when he said something, he was funny. Like he was talking about Lee Gershwin, and I said something about Lee trying to cheer someone up, and he said, Lee cheers you up when you're feeling good.
Well, and Ira is godfather to
Liza.
Liza, yeah.
Yes.
I literally, we could go for hours and hours. But also check out Michael's interview for Metrosource magazine that comes out later this week.
Yeah.
There's a little bit about Elaine Stritch in there too, and some of the other So you'll have to Stritch it. But you have to tune in the magazine for that. Follow Michael Feinstein at michaelfeinstein.com. There's links to everything, and on Instagram, Michael Feinstein Sings. There's little snippets, little nuggets. Laura, can you tell everybody where you want them to find you and follow you?
Someday I'll find you.
Wherever they want. I was off of social media since
I
June
know you were
of
like,
2020,
where is this girl?
and I'm back. I am going to start going by my middle name, which is Elsie, and I've always gone by Elsie Laura on social media. So
I used to have a girlfriend.
that's right.
Yeah.
I wore this, and my Jehovah's Witness family came to it, and they're like,
Oh my Lord!
I'm like, bye, I'm leaving the religion.
Oh, wow.
And I can't believe the film is celebrating 50 years.
50 years.
I
So
cannot
classic.
believe that. I ran into Michael York a few years ago, and he just sitting there with his wife, and I'm such a fan, so he sat with me for an hour, just chatting. Didn't know me from anything. I could have been some,
Nicest man.
so nice.
And Pat, his wife, was there on the set of Cabaret, and she took these amazing photographs.
Wow.
She documented much of that film in pictures. So she is quite a wonderful photographer. They're amazing people.
That's a film I don't think needs a remake or a reboot or.
Oh,
No.
that won't stop anybody.
Well,
I enjoyed the Fosse Verdon section of that time.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that, but how could you? Why would you?
Yeah, well, Liza didn't see the Halston series, but she did see Fosse Verdon, and I said, "What did you think of the actress who played you?" She said she was great. She said, but her ass is too big.
Do you know my friend said that too? I was like, that's not Liza.
Because she said, it's great. She said, but that's not my ass. And I said, okay. I mean, how many people know what their ass looks like? She does. I mean, I don't know what my ass looks like, but but she thought she did a good job, so that's what's important.
Hey, there's a type. There's a Michael Feinstein type. So, known for his assets. It's interesting. Interesting that there we go. That she didn't say Halston because that was a pretty intimate show, and you kind of wonder how much of it.
I haven't seen it either.
It's very interesting.
Okay.
Well, it's a very different story. I knew Halston very well because Halston hosted a party for me when I opened on Broadway, and I spent a lot of time with him. And he was a very funny guy, and he was beloved by his friends. And I would have loved to have seen him be so much more. But Liza didn't want to see it because she didn't want to revisit that.
Yeah, of course.
And inevitably, in a film, they'll take artistic license. And so the way that she met Halston is not depicted the way it happened in the movie because they made a choice for whatever reason. The way she really met Halston is that she, in the movie, they show her singing in a nightclub, and she's kind of
Liza with a Z, that's the song that they put.
Frumpily dressed, and he goes up and says, I know how to dress you. Well, actually, she was already wearing gorgeous clothes, and she had made several movies and had been on TV, and she was a star, and she was playing at the Persian Room with a huge orchestra, not a combo. Yeah. And she was at Bergdorf's with Kay Thompson, and she sees this dress on a mannequin. She says, my God, I love the cut of that dress. She said, I have to find out who did this dress. And Kay Thompson said, oh, that's Halston. I'll introduce you. And she took her upstairs, and she met Halston, and that's how they met. And so it wasn't that he rescued her from fashion oblivion, no. But that was a plot point that they chose, and that's okay. So I mean, it's it's not accurate, but and that would have driven her crazy, because wait, that's not how it happened.
And really did focus on his downfall and his issues.
Yeah. Well, and she wouldn't have liked to see that about her friend. Yeah. It would have been too emotionally difficult for her.
Can you come back just so we can tell stories the whole time?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll make up more stories.
What show's in town coming up? Did you say something on April 6th?
Oh, that's Carnegie Hall. Carnegie Hall with Catherine Russell. And
it's that way.
Yeah, it's the other way. Then, let's see. L.A., I think June 7th and 8th, I'll be doing something at my club, Feinstein's at Vitello's, with Frida Payne, who's one of my favorite people and singers. And then the Pasadena Pop season over the summer. And I'll be doing my Judy Garland Centennial show with orchestras, San Diego Symphony and Cincinnati Pops and other places. So
yeah, we got emails. I'm like, can you give tickets away from that? I'm like, I believe they're pretty much sold out.
Well, but I have an in.
I know a guy.
It's the audition process. You have to
He's a Michael Feinstein type. All right, well, that's another episode of On the Rocks. It's always a grab bag of fun. What a special opportunity. And again, thank you so much for sharing so much of your life and your personal life. Big thank you to our guests, my engineer, Tony Swait, our social media clip editor, Alexis Mendez. Please like, share, subscribe so we can continue bringing this fabulous show coming your way for free. Coming up, we have Broadway and NCIS LA's Barrett Foa is here to talk about his time on Broadway, also his many years on NCIS LA. So until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, stay sexy, and most importantly, stay tipsy. See you next week. This has been another episode of On the Rocks. Tweet me and slide into my DMs on Twitter and Instagram at On the Rocks On Air. Find everything On the Rocks for free at OnTheRocksRadioshow.com. Subscribe, like, review, and share. Until next week, stay fabulous.